Hey everybody, welcome to episode 86 of the Masterclass. My name's Cam Brennan, his name is Dave Hogue, and we are your gracious hosts.
Yes, we are.
Is that a gracious host? Is it something you say about yourself? Or is that something you say to people after they have hosted you well?
Yes.
Mayhaps I used incorrect words. Anyways, it's episode 86, Dave. We're back in your basement yet again.
Yes, we are.
It is our second episode of 2017. 2 for 2, man.
2 for 2 right now, yeah.
We're gonna be perfect this year, Dave. No mistakes. Deal?
No mistakes?
No mistakes. We're gonna be perfect.
Yeah, no.
So, before today's episode, I posted something in our Slack group to all of our hosts and our patrons that are in there. Well, our patron, I should say. We have one patron that's made their way into our Slack so far, and I asked this question. I said, we're recording episode 86 of the Masterclass tonight, and we should be talking about the Abomination of Desolation. I left a little wiggle room in there in case we decided to freak out and talk about something else. Anyone have questions or suggestions for discussion points? And then Martin, who writes for our college football blog, who I also may have beaten in the college football pick'em, just saying, he goes, yeah, what is that? So, Martin, rest assured, we will hopefully answer the question of what the Abomination of Desolation is. And my response to him was, well, besides being the best name for a pro wrestling finishing move ever, I'm not 100% sure, but we'll look into it.
The Abomination of Desolation. Yeah.
It sounds foreboding, and anyways, we'll get into it because that's going to be our main topic, really, for this episode. Is there anything that you want to say or share about anything before we dive into what is sure to be something?
The only thing that came to my mind was my latest book that I'm listening to. And I did not go seeking this out. I kind of just stumbled upon it as I was choosing a book to listen to. And it's called The Insanity of God.
Super.
And it is by Nick Ripken.
Any relation to Cal?
No, because it is not his real name. And basically...
It's a pseudonym? No, a pen name? What's that?
I think it's a pen name, but I'm not... his ministry is actually like nickripken.org or something. nickripkenministries.org or something like that.
Why doesn't he use his real name?
Well, because he is a missionary to places in the world where the church is persecuted, including Somaliland, the former Soviet Union, which at the time that he was there was freshly the former Soviet Union. I am currently in the chapter 20-something where he is in China and experiencing the home churches in China. And like I said, I didn't go out looking for this. I just kind of stumbled on it. It was a recommendation of Audible based on previous books I'd listened to. And I don't believe everyone is called to the life that Nick Ripken and his wife Ruth are living, but it's well worth listening to, and I would assume it's well worth reading. Very unique story about being missionaries to places where Christians are persecuted, and some very heart-wrenching stories. Not just what they see, but what happens to them and their family. And very honest, just sort of... I was 45 years old before I realized that, X, Y, and Z. And just, doesn't pretend to have it all together, doesn't pretend to have all the answers. Was probably very naive going into what he did. And it's paralleled for me much of what we've been talking about in terms of the end times and how for different people around the world, and literally hearing about Christians that have spent 3 years in jail, 17 years in jail, have been killed for what they believe. It's like, yeah, this is going on around the world. So,
what was the name of the book?
The Insanity of God. And he has 2 books. There's another one like The Obedience of God or something. I'm listening to The Insanity of God.
That's definitely a clickbaity title.
And I have not spent a lot of time on his website, but it's nickripken.com, and it's NIKRIPKEN.com. And he says that is not his real name. But on his website, there's very much pictures of him and his wife. So I don't totally understand what that's all about. But like I said, I just happened to stumble upon this. I don't think everybody's called to the life that he and his wife and his family live. But The Insanity of Obedience is the other one.
So he likes the insanity stuff.
Well, if you listen to what he does, you're kind of like, yeah, insane. So
fair enough. I actually started listening to an audible book this morning after talking with my buddy Justin last night. He asked for some Audible recommendations, and I kind of ran through my list and threw some out there. I realized that I had a few credits like a month or two ago that I used, and then I canceled my account because I'm just like 9 books behind on my Audible list, and so there's no point in paying more money for books that I'm clearly not going to listen to for a long time. So I decided I'm going to start working my way through those now that I'm commuting back to work. And so I started listening to The Reason for God by Tim Keller.
Yes.
I have the book. I read, I think, the first half of it back when I was a youth pastor because I was thinking about doing a series for the students on, and we touched on those topics, but the book was more research for me back then than it was solely for edification. And obviously, like when you do research, you learn,
right?
And I needed to learn it so I could teach it. But it's different when you're consuming something, be it audio or reading with the intention to turn around and teach it to someone. It's different when you're just reading it for your own benefit. And so I thought, oh shoot, I recommended it to Justin. I was like, I need to listen to that. So I listened to, I don't know, like an hour and a half of it today. And it's really, really good. And Tim Keller is the one who actually reads it. So if you are looking for some recommendations, there you go. You've got 2 pretty good books right there. Very different books.
Yes.
But you didn't ask for recommendations, but we gave them to you anyways.
Yes.
That's just, the kind of gracious host that we are, Dave. I'm going to keep saying gracious host as many times as I can this episode.
And of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Timothy Keller books that I have on my Audible, he has not read a single one of them.
Really?
So
that's disappointing.
Lloyd James, Maurice England, Lloyd James. So that those 2 people tend to be, looks like, who read his books. And Maurice England looks like he does some other. Oh, I'm not I'm not close enough to my microphone. Anyway, I'm rambling, so I'll just quit there.
It's all good. That gives me a perfect opportunity to say thank you to, again, this month, our Patreon supporters, Katie and Wilby.
Yeah.
Another month in the books. Another month of support. If you guys want to get into the Slack channel the Slack group that I mentioned earlier and get some sort of the behind the scenes stuff, like the opportunity to ask direct questions about what we're going to be recording, have influence over the stuff that we talk about, you can do so. Go to patreon.com/supermegacorp and you'll find the cut me some slack reward because I'm clever and that's what I called it. And you can find out more details there. And yeah, thank you to our patrons. We love you guys. You're the best. Thank you so much. Is that cheesy?
Sure.
That's not what I was
A little
going
bit.
for. It's not what I was going for.
Okay.
Did it sound needy?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Sounded manly and yes, not at all codependent. Good job. All right. We have set before us, Dave, one doozy of a passage.
Yes.
Would you care to read it, please?
Sure. So we're at Matthew 24. Oop, I need to scroll down here. 15. And we'll go through verse 28 for now. And it reads, "So, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. And if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you that beforehand. So, if they say to you, 'Look, he is in the wilderness,' do not go out. If they say, 'Look, he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather."
Right. So there's that.
Yeah.
This should be good. All right. So let's start with the very first thing. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. So we got to go back to Daniel, which is in the Old Testament. And specifically, it's in chapter 9, verse 27, where the phrase, the abomination of desolation, or in my translation here, the ESV, it says, "And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator." That doesn't help.
No.
Not a whole lot. But I found a few helpful resources. I am using my ESV Study Bible, and Bible snobs would call that the ESV Answer Bible, because you don't study; it just tells you answers. Ha 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 ha. I didn't like those kids in college.
Yeah.
But also, there's an article on the Gospel Coalition, which will be in the show notes as well. And the title of the article is, "What is the Abomination of Desolation?" Which is exactly what Martin asked, and exactly what I hope we can answer to begin with, so that we can kind of go from there and try and understand what all this doom and gloom and destruction is actually talking about. So, all right, the Abomination of Desolation. So an abomination is something terrible, something horrific, right? It's used in the Old Testament, according to this article, more than 100 times.
Ooh.
But just a few times in the New Testament, most of which are in the Gospels talking about this. And so I'm going to quote the article here. It says, "An abomination is normally a great sin, commonly worthy of death. Readers immersed in current debates about sexual ethics may first think an abomination is a sexual sin, where Scripture refers to sexual sins like adultery, homosexuality, and bestiality as abominations. Leviticus 18 for a quick reference. But more often, throughout the Bible, abomination refers to major covenant violations, especially idolatry, such as in Deuteronomy 7, 13, 17, 18, 27, and 32. In the historical books, abomination always describes idolatry, often with child sacrifice.
Wow.
And it also refers to idolatry in the prophets, including in Daniel 9 and 11. So, the breaking of, the violation of a major covenant, right? So, a violation of the established relationship between God and whoever, be it the people of Israel, be it the king, the prophets, anyone that God has made a covenant with, that binding relationship that goes far beyond a contract, goes far beyond a handshake deal. It is a mutually beneficial relationship geared towards the edification of both people, right? That's what we mean by covenant. Something that two people or two parties enter into to mutually edify and love and build the other person up. It's not about yourself. It is about enjoying the goodness of right relationship, kind of like Jesus had with the Holy Spirit and God. And so a major violation of any covenant is an abomination. And I guess you can begin to understand why. You think of the marriage covenant that the Bible talks about, and the man representing Jesus and the wife representing the church, and all of the the spiritual implications involved in that. The man sacrificing himself and laying himself down for the benefit of the church. The church worship, all of the things that are larger than our humanity that a covenant like that represents. And so a major violation of a covenant like that is often something real bad, right?
I would think so.
I mean, you think of what's a violation of the marriage covenant? Adultery, murder. That's pretty bad, right?
Right.
Getting angry at each other, not a violation of the covenant, right?
Right.
Being selfish, not a good thing. Definitely a sin, not a violation of the covenant. It probably stresses the covenant, but when you're in violation of something, and as an officer of the law, perhaps you can elaborate on what being in violation of something means. Like, to me, violation is like, here's the line, you blew past it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, when someone violates the law, what does that mean to you?
The word that comes to my mind is they break the law. That's probably not the best way to say it. I think there's this, like, there's a legitimate, like, disregard. There's kind of this awareness. There's intent behind that.
Exactly.
And so to me, a violation is this idea of, I know what I'm not supposed to do, and yet I do it anyway. And not only do I do it anyway, but there's kind of a disregard for, I don't care that this law exists. And so, I'll leave it at that. I started to go down my whole other political road.
Well, yeah, the idea of that there's intent behind it, I think is you nailed that. But I don't think that breaking is a bad metaphor, and I think it's an easier one for, because, like, I broke the law, I went 36. Like, technically, yes, you sped.
Right.
But the concept of breaking something means it once was whole and working properly. And now, because of something that you chose to do, it no longer functions the way it's supposed to. And so when you violate a covenant, you take the covenant that is working, that is whole, that is as it should be, and when you break it, when you violate it on purpose, right? You take what was good and you have now broken it, and it is no longer what it used to be. And I think maybe, like, break the law, like, that's just such a common turn of phrase that you lose the impact of, like, no, you broke something. You took something that was functioning and was good and for the benefit of the greater good, and you broke it. You you stopped allowing it to do what it was intended to do. And so when we think of this term abomination, I want people to think of like this, to your point, this is an intent. This is something that is devastating to whatever it acts upon, you know? And I feel like the word abomination, at least in my world, has kept that meaning of, okay, we throw a violation around like, 3-second violation in basketball. It's not a violation. It's a foul. I mean, yeah, he broke the rules, but it's a game. It's not a covenant, right? It's a stupid game that a lot of people like. And frankly, I like it too, but you get my point. It's not moral, it's not ethical, it's not spiritual, it's just a game. But the term abomination, I don't know about you, I don't hear people throwing that word around too much.
No.
Travesty, maybe. But usually the term abomination is reserved for stuff that is truly awful.
Yeah.
Genocide, hate crimes, terrorist attacks, things that are truly and genuinely horrible. And the thing that I find interesting about that, at least nowadays, is that a lot of people, regardless of what they believe politically, theologically, will agree on what an abomination is and isn't.
Yes.
So I think that we've got that in our favor, that we understand, and I feel like I'm beating this to a bloody pulp here, so we'll move on quickly, but just keep that in mind with abomination. So we move on to Daniel chapter 9, and it's that whole section, 9, 10, 11, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird stuff that happens, and you guys can go back and read that. It's pretty interesting. Don't read it because it's weird and difficult. Read it because it's interesting, and it's going to help you understand what's going on here. So, Daniel, according again to this article and to the quick study that I did before this, Daniel 9, 26 and 27 refers to a prince who will destroy the city, Jerusalem, along with its temple and sacrifices. And then it says, on the wings of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. 2 chapters later, there is another reference to an abomination in connection to the temple. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. So that's the second phrase there. So now we get into like the world of academia and scholarly pursuits, which is not my favorite world.
Mine.
Not because I don't like intelligence and I don't like knowledge and I like all of those things. It's just the further you get into academia, the further you get away from what's actually going on. Especially when it comes to the Bible. When the Bible becomes a secondary or tertiary source for what you're arguing about, you've lost your mind. When people are writing doctoral theses debating what this dead German guy said versus what this dead French guy said, and not at all concerned about the Bible, yet they're getting their, PhD in theology. The Bible should be a primary source.
Yes.
And the dead German guy and the dead French guy should be secondary sources, because guess what? Their stuff isn't the word of God. But I digress. Back to what we're talking about. So the first reference, according to a lot of scholars, is referring to the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes IV, who ruled Palestine from 175 to 64 BC. That is a long time to be in charge.
Yes.
I wonder if he was like king at the age of 3 or something. But
it could have been.
So he hated Israel. He was horrible to them. He tore down the temple, stopped the sacrifices, set up an idol for Zeus, and apparently offered swine as a sacrifice just to make the Jewish folks angry and to defy their God. So it's an abomination because it's idolatry, and it brings desolation because it defiles the holy place at the heart of Israel. So the very thing that represents God's presence to the people has then been desecrated and made a mockery of, and so the covenant has been broken. So that's one theory. The other theory is, let me switch to my other thing here, my Bible. And so let me just read this real quick. So several times in Jewish history, it was thought that the prophecy was being fulfilled, most notably during the days of the Maccabees, we've mentioned a few times in previous episodes, when Antiochus Epiphanes was up to his stuff. So we've got that covered. But Jesus, according to this article, clarifies that the complete fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy will be found in the Roman destruction of the temple in AD 70, which we've already talked about in a previous episode when we're talking, is he talking about his body or is he talking about the temple? Because the temple does get destroyed in AD 70. And the image of the Antichrist being set up in the last days, which can be found in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 and Revelation 13:14. So all of that really, really, really long-winded reading that you could have done yourself, and I probably just wasted a few minutes of your time. The Abomination of Desolation, I don't know. Like, there's all these theories.
Yeah.
It could have been... And so one of the things, too, about biblical prophecy is that there are oftentimes multiple fulfillments of the prophecy. And oftentimes in ways that are unexpected. And so it is possible that they are referring to Antiochus Epiphanes, but they're also referring to the destruction of the temple. And then you bring in this whole third idea of the dispensationalists, and they get into the whole 70 weeks thing from Daniel chapter 9, where the first 69 weeks have happened, and then we're in this giant long gap between the 69th week and the 70th week, even though there's no gaps in between weeks, Dave. I don't think I know how a calendar works. Called the church age, which is their, and I don't know how much you guys know about dispensationalism. I'm not a fan, based on what I learned in college and the reading that I had to do with how they view the Old Testament and the dispensations in the Old Testament, the Abrahamic covenant. And it seems like they want everything to fit a nice little formula, and that's just not how life or God works. So all of that to say, the Abomination of Desolation could be Antiochus Epiphanes in the temple. It could be the temple in AD 70. Or it could be something completely different.
Yes. And
I don't really have a final answer. What do you think, Dave? Did any of that make sense?
Yeah. And I haven't done extensive research on this, but in preparation, did look up, and nothing that I came across made this any clearer for me. And I guess there's a little bit of tension there for me in terms of, I feel like Jesus is saying, so when you see the abomination of desolation, so when this happens, back at what Daniel mentioned, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Okay, well, I'm not in Judea, so I'm not going to worry about fleeing to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop go down to take what is in the house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. So I don't have a definitive thing that I land on, but it does talk about the great tribulation, and this is one of those words that seems to be, coming up quite frequently for us. And again, this was not something that I went looking for, but I decided to take a look at the book of Revelation, because I was like, well, that has to deal with the end times, right? So, and in it, in Revelation 1, verse 9, it says, I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the patience, endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. So he's about to see everything that goes on in the book of Revelation. So before that even happens, before he even has his vision of the Son of Man, John identifies himself as our brother and partner in the tribulation. And so there's this sense for me as I read in this and I hear about that there's going to be great tribulation, such as been from the beginning of the world until now and never will be. There are some pretty just awful things happening in the world. Just even, the book that I referenced earlier about the insanity of God, things that I have seen in my job, stuff that has been recorded throughout history. I mean, I guess even some of the things that are in the Bible, and specifically the Old Testament. And I guess I come to this place where I'm just like, I don't get what the worst thing could be. Like, I don't know that I want to know. And so, as I read John, and he says he's our brother and our partner in the tribulation, I really do land on this sort of the tribulation for me are the times in between Jesus' first coming and then his second coming. And that, as we mentioned last week, it's going to be truly awful for some people, and it's not going to be as bad for others, because, specifically in this verse, he talks about, those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. We're not in Judea. And I'm not just going to write it off as, well, I'm not in Judea, so this doesn't affect me.
We'd have to run a really long way to get to the mountains.
We would. But again, I guess I come back to the whole, this is in here for a reason. Clearly, it's something that Jesus talks about, and therefore it has importance, because again, it's not just a kind of a fleeting deal. I mean, we're talking Matthew 24 and 25, and we've just scratched the surface on it. I'm fascinated by the fact that the temple came down in 70 AD. And something that we really haven't talked much about right now is what's there now. And it is
the Trump Tower.
It is not Trump Tower, no.
Oh, okay.
But there's not a Jewish temple there. There's not a Christian church. There's not a synagogue.
There's a mosque, isn't there?
There's a mosque, yeah. And so, I don't know if that plays into the Abomination, the fact that it's called Dome of the Rock.
Yeah.
And it's I want to say it's gold, but I guess I don't know if it's gold or not. It looks gold. But the Dome of the Rock is where the temple used to be. And another thing that I stumbled across this week, and I don't know if it has any significance at all in this, but Christian Americans think that there's a lot of significance in Israel becoming a state in 1948. The Jewish nation being put back together after World War II. But if you talk to Christians that are actually living in Jerusalem or in Israel today, it's a very small percentage that think that has any sort of biblical significance to it. And I get that I'm kind of rambling on here a little bit, but one, I don't believe that there's going to be significant events related to the end times, to the second coming of Jesus, to all this that we're reading here that applies to 21st century America. And that's so how we want to view everything. Now, as followers of Jesus, I certainly think it's important, but we view the world very much through our lens and how things happening over there affect us. And I just don't think that's the case. And I do think it's interesting that the Dome of the Rock, a non-Christian, non-Jewish building, now exists where the temple was. And I sincerely don't know. Is that ground holy or not? Could be. Probably. But to me, that's a bit of an abomination as a Christian or even a Jew to see that temple be, or not a temple, but a mosque, I guess. I'm not even sure if it's a mosque, to be honest with you. So.
Really? Let's look it up. When you said that we want Jesus' second coming to be, it's an Islamic shrine located on the Temple Mount, the old city of Jerusalem. Anyways, when you said that we wanted Jesus to come back in like, an American way or have it all like be 21st century America, I thought the second coming of Jesus, see it on IMAX in 3D.
And it was just interesting, this article that I ran across, because American Christians very much want there to be this connection between us and the Jews of Jerusalem and Israel. The Jewish Christians, the Muslim Christians, the Christians that live in Israel don't have the same kind of reciprocating view that we do. And I should see if I can find that article so that we can put it in the show notes. But very interesting to me of just how myopic our view of the world can be.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's fast forward to the end where he's saying, for false Christ and false prophets will arise. We've kind of talked about this again, or already in previous episodes. Perform great signs and wonders to lead you astray, and if possible, even the elect. So once saved, always not saved? Let the debate begin. So, I've told you beforehand. So, if they say to you, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, don't believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And then I'm going to say the last verse for the end. But I think Jesus is being a bit tongue-in-cheek here. If he's out in the wilderness, don't go.
Right.
If he's in the inner rooms, don't go. I'm going to show up like a flash of lightning. Like, do you think I'm going to walk around going, hey, guys, I'm back. Hey, come look at me do tricks. Like, that's not how he started his ministry. He just started, right? Mm-hmm. He just showed up unannounced to John the Baptist, and boom, it was game time. Mm-hmm. No warning, no, Evite. He just showed up and did it. And as, the thief comes like a wolf in the night, Jesus is going to be like, oh, I'm going to come back like lightning. Like, it's just going to hit. And when it does, it's not going to be, foreshadowed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's foreshadowed in the sense that we know it's going to happen. And bad things are going to happen, but bad things are always happening.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to happen. So I think it's funny that, like, if people are out there saying that they're the Christ, they're not the Christ. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to announce my coming. It's going to happen when it happens, and you're not going to see it coming until it does.
Yes.
So, little piece of friendly advice. If someone out there is saying that they're Jesus, they're not Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't go to their church in their basement. Don't drink their Kool-Aid.
No. Yeah.
Don't drink their wine. Don't do it. And then the last one wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. That's like Edgar Allan Poe stuff.
Yeah.
Or maybe he got it from Jesus. But I think, it's a very vivid image. But I think that it's a pretty strong statement. Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around it so I can, speak English. But it's like, wherever the smoke is, there's fire.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever there's vultures, there's dead bodies. So look out for the vultures. Don't the fake Christ, like they're out to get everybody. The false prophets, the false teachers, and the vultures are attracted, to the dead bodies because it's food. So if you just keep your eyes open and your ears open and you start seeing vultures, obviously, here we're not talking about actual birds. We're talking about people with ill intent.
Mm-hmm.
Go the other direction.
Yes. Yeah. And, what, when I think of vultures and false prophets, some of the things that just come to my mind are, they ask for money and want you to fund their ministry, and
Farting preacher.
You'll be blessed with that. I think false prophets have also used sex, and particularly for their benefit, and not it's just that
people don't do that, Dave. Come on, no one does that.
But those false prophets, the people that have been followed, are going to exhibit those sorts of things that you're like, yeah, I don't think Jesus did this. So, yeah, and it's just, honestly, I still just wrestle with what does God call us to do? What does it mean to be a Christian? And what do we need to be willing to give up? And do we have to give it up, or is it a condition of our heart? Is our and I guess what I'm arriving at is that in addition to, I read Revelation 1, and I realized that as I'm reading Revelation 1 and I'm looking at John, I was kind of like, what happened to all the disciples? The 12 that followed Jesus, what really became of them? And interestingly enough, John, who identifies himself as a partner or a brother in the tribulation, is the only one that died a natural death. If you look at all the other disciples, I'm just going to read through this list real quick. It's stabbed with a sword, filled with arrows, crucified by soldiers, thrust with a spear, crucified, stoned to death, crucified upside down, beheaded, stabbed with a sword, crucified on an X-shaped cross, and crucified. And so the whole verse of, when Jesus calls him, or verse, but saying of when Jesus calls a man, he calls him to come and die. 11 of the 12 disciples, and then you got Judas, who committed suicide. They died. They literally died for their faith. And I guess all I'm saying in my rambling here again is that it doesn't matter when we live throughout history. We need to figure out what it means for us individually to die to Christ, and for him to live in us, and for us to live the life that he wants us to live, and not the life that we would choose to live. And I will be the first to admit that I'm not always sure that I do that. So,
well, I can be the second to admit that.
But yeah, so that's, I'm curious to see where we land on the other side of all this, because I have not spent a lot of time on this in my Christian faith, and I'm seeing why I haven't, because it's hard. It's not easy, and it's I just kind of want to arrive at this place of just sort of, well, it doesn't matter. But if Jesus spoke it and took up 2 whole chapters in a book recording what he said on this, there obviously has some serious implications to it. So that's what I got to say about that.
Cool. Well, I think we have brought the ship in to a nice smooth landing. People didn't even know that we were coming to an end. It's because we're gracious hosts, Dave. But hey, that's it for episode 86. You guys know how to get to the Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes. There'll also be a link to Dave's Twitter and mine in our email in case you want to get in touch.
Yes.
Be like, hey, Crazy Pants, you got this totally wrong.
And I changed my Twitter.
We could have had follow-up, Dave.
We could have had follow-up.
For like the first time in like 17 episodes.
I'll have to do it next. We can do it at the beginning next time.
Oh, you're clever.
Yes.
Episode 87 next week.
Woohoo.
Bye.
Bye.